Imagine standing on the floor of a massive modern fulfillment center. You know the exact kind of place I'm talking about, right?
Oh, absolutely. The endless concrete.
Yeah, exactly. Like millions of square feet of just perfectly poured concrete. You've got these endless rows of steel shelving stretching out until they basically vanish into this perfectly calculated horizon line.
Right. And it's almost dizzying.
It really is. And there are thousands of workers moving around inside this structure. But if you close your eyes, you barely hear a human voice.
Just machines.
Yeah, what you hear is the rhythmic, totally frictionless hum of conveyor belts. You hear the synchronized beeping of handheld scanners. I mean, you are witnessing the absolute uninterrupted flow of global logistics.
Which on paper is incredible.
Right. Everything in that building is measurable. Everything is categorized. Everything serves a central algorithm with just flawless precision. Honestly, it is a triumph of engineering.
It really is an astonishing feat of logistics. I mean, you are looking at an environment where inefficiency and friction have been almost entirely engineered out of existence.
Yeah, completely.
And if you are just looking at a spreadsheet, or a quarterly earnings report, that setup looks like a utopia. It looks like peak human achievement.
Right. But that warehouse is a modern marvel that also functions as a kind of trap.
Oh, for sure.
Like if you stand there long enough, the initial awe you feel starts to curdle into something a little bit colder. You start to realize that to maintain that perfect, frictionless flow, the system requires the human beings inside it to act like interchangeable parts.
Yes, they become parts of the machine.
Exactly. That silence on the floor isn't peaceful at all. It's the sound of individual autonomy being quietly erased by a monopoly on motion.
Right.
You walk exactly where the scanner tells you to walk. You pick what it tells you to pick. You just don't improvise.
Because improvisation introduces friction, right?
Yeah.
In that environment, a unique human thought is actually a liability. It is the absolute definition of a closed system.
Wow, yeah. A closed system.
Yeah. And the thing about closed systems, no matter how brilliantly designed they are, is that they are incredibly fragile under the surface. They literally cannot handle the unpredictable reality of human nature for very long.
Which brings us to exactly why you're joining us today for this deep dive.
Right into the deep end.
Exactly. If you're walking your dog right now or commuting to work or maybe even listening to this on your break at one of those very fulfillment centers, we are going to look at a story you might think you already know.
But we're going to examine it in a way that throws all the conventional wisdom right out the window.
Totally. Today's deep dive is tossing out the Sunday school flannel graphs, the gentle spiritual inspiration, and all those standardized morality tales.
We are stripping all of that away, just tearing it down to get to the structural core of the text.
Completely. We are executing a system override today. We are conducting a forensic sociological teardown of Genesis chapters 10 and 11.
Which is such a fascinating section of the text.
It is. And we are doing it strictly through the lens of what is sometimes called materialist Christianity.
Right.
Now, before that term scares anyone off, let me explain our operating rule for the next hour. I want you to adopt this mindset religion as applied physics.
I love that phrase so much.
It's the only way to read it today. For the duration of this conversation, we're going to assume that the ancient writers of these texts were not hallucinating magic.
Right. They weren't just writing whimsical fairy tales about a grumpy guy in the clouds throwing lightning bolts.
Exactly. Through this specific analytical lens, we assume they were documenting the brutal physical realities of human survival. They were documenting social friction and natural law.
Yes.
So every seemingly miraculous or divine word we are about to encounter is actually a container for a material historical truth.
And setting that ground rule right out of the gate is absolutely crucial for what we are about to do.
It really is.
Because we are dropping into a narrative that describes a world reeling from a catastrophic civilization-ending rupture. I mean, the flood.
Right. The ultimate reset button.
Exactly. The text tells us that the world has just been repopulated, divided, and scattered. Humanity basically has a second chance to figure out how to live on this planet.
But almost immediately,
Yeah.
human society faces this massive crisis of coordination.
Oh, yeah. A huge one.
They have to figure out how to survive together in a really harsh environment. And their solution to that problem takes us directly into the ancient plains of Shinar,
where we are going to witness the construction of the very first great human monopoly.
the Tower of Babel.
The Tower of Babel.
So let's look under the hood of this text, starting with the material baseline. Genesis chapter 11 opens with a very specific, very famous description.
It sets the stage perfectly.
It really does. It says, quote, Now, the whole earth had one language and the same words, end quote.
Mm-mm.
And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there.
So, if we strip away the myth and examine the actual mechanics of this idea of unity, we have to ask a very grounded question.
Okay, what is it?
What does a single language and a centralized geography actually do for an ancient society?
Well, I mean, if we look at this through the physics of human sociology, a single language means zero friction in trade
Exactly. Zero friction in labor.
and zero friction in command. It is the ultimate perfect infrastructure for mass coordination.
Think about it from the perspective of an ancient ruler. If I am the king, my orders are understood instantly by everyone,
Right, without the need for mistranslation.
without the messy cultural resistance that comes when different tribes try to negotiate meaning.
Okay, wait, I have to jump in here and play devil's advocate for a second.
Please do.
Because I think a lot of people listening would push back on this premise right out of the gate. Isn't universal communication the ultimate dream?
It definitely seems like it to us today.
Right. Look at our world today. We spend billions of dollars building real-time translation apps on our phones. We lay massive fiber optic cables across the literal ocean floors to create global networks.
Just to achieve exactly this kind of frictionless communication.
Exactly. We view a unified, connected society where everyone can understand everyone else as the absolute peak of progress.
Sure.
So why in the world is this ancient text framing a unified, frictionless society like one language and the same words as the prelude to a total disaster?
It's a brilliant question, and that is exactly the core contradiction we have to resolve to understand this text. It feels totally counterintuitive to our modern sensibilities.
It really does.
But what this sociological framework suggests is that total homogeneity, sameness across the board, is actually a massive vulnerability for a society, not a strength.
Wait, really? A vulnerability?
Think about it materially. Without friction, there is no natural push and pull of differing ideas. There's no debate.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Without borders, without differing perspectives, without even the slight misunderstandings that actually force humans to sit down, negotiate, and adapt to one another, power encounters absolutely no resistance.
Because everyone is just on the exact same wavelength, so whatever the loudest voice says just goes.
Exactly. And when centralized power encounters no resistance, it easily and inevitably concentrates into a single, inescapable hierarchy.
Because there's literally nowhere else to go. There is no competing framework.
Right.
Like, if you don't like the way things are run, you can't join another group with a different philosophy because
Right.
everyone operates under the exact same system.
Right? If you only have one language, you only have one way to describe reality. You grant the leaders an absolute monopoly on thought and social motion.
That is terrifying when you put it like that.
It is. There is no diversity of ideas, and more importantly, there is no escape from the central narrative.
Let's put this in modern terms for the listener. Imagine a corporation that controls your entire town.
Okay, a classic company town.
Yeah. If that centralized power decides that your labor is worth nothing, and they invent a corporate jargon that justifies paying you less.
Calling it something like dynamic wage optimization.
Yes. Perfect. Dynamic wage optimization. You can't even articulate a defense against it. Why? Because the very language you are forced to speak is controlled and defined by the system that is extracting value from you.
That is a perfect translation of the text. Under this materialist lens, the one language of Babel isn't a beautiful, harmonious utopia of human brotherhood.
Far from it.
Right. It is the absolute precondition for totalitarian extraction.
It's the Amazon warehouse floor all over again. The algorithm speaks one language. It tells you your pick rate is too low.
And you can't argue with it.
No, you can't argue with the scanner in French or Spanish or with a union rep. The scanner only speaks efficiency. You either follow the scanner's language perfectly or you are removed from the floor.
Precisely. The language itself becomes the cage. And in the plains of Shinar, this frictionless, unified environment immediately births a new technology to enforce that control.
And this is the turning point in the text, right?
It absolutely is. It marks the exact moment human society shifts from organic, natural, localized growth to manufactured, centralized uniformity.
And this is where the physical details of the text get so fascinating to me. Because Genesis doesn't just casually mention that they all talk the same way and then leave it at that.
No, it gets very specific.
It zeroes in on a very specific physical, technological innovation. Let me read Genesis 11, verses 3 and 4.
Go for it.
It says, quote, "And they said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly.' and they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar.
Right.
Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." End quote.
We have to stop right there and focus heavily on the word brick.
The brick.
Yes, the brick.
Right.
If we are treating this text as applied sociology and physics, the brick isn't just a building material. It is the central technology of empire.
Okay, unpack this for me.
We need to look closely at the mechanics of this invention. Think about how a society builds a structure before the invention of the brick. What do they use?
Well, they build with natural stone. Like, you go to a local quarry, or you clear a farmer's field, and you pull up whatever kind of rock the earth naturally gives you in that specific region.
Exactly. And natural stone is inherently irregular. It is deeply frustrating to work with if you want to build something fast.
Because none of them match.
Right. Every single stone you pull from the earth has a different shape. It has a different density, a different grain, a different center of gravity.
So it takes time.
It takes immense time. To build a strong, lasting wall out of natural stone requires a master craftsman, a mason.
Someone who actually knows the material.
Exactly. The builder has to pick up a specific stone, run their hands over it, examine its unique contours, its flaws, its natural strengths, and figure out exactly where it naturally fits in the complex puzzle of the wall.
So the stone retains its individual integrity.
Yes. The builder has to respect the material they are working with.
It's a relationship between the worker and the material. The worker has autonomy, skill, and has to use their brain for every single placement. So natural stone is almost like a human being in a healthy society. Flawed, completely unique, and requiring care to figure out where they best fit into the community.
That is a beautiful way to put it. Now, contrast that entirely with a manufactured brick.
Well, a brick is, it's just mud.
It is mud or clay that has been violently stripped of its natural context.
Wow. Violently stripped.
Yes, it is forced into a perfectly uniform, standardized wooden mold. It is then subjected to intense heat in a kiln to burn out all of its natural moisture and irregularity.
Just baking all the uniqueness right out of it.
Exactly. And what comes out of that kiln is something entirely uniform, interchangeable, and mass-produced.
But wait, let me push back again because my modern brain is just screaming at me here.
Bring it on!
Isn't standardization just good, safe engineering? Like if I'm building a house today or a skyscraper, I don't want the builders trying to creatively fit a bunch of weirdly shaped boulders together.
That's fair.
I want uniform, tested, identical steel beams and bricks so the building doesn't collapse on my head. Why is standardization inherently oppressive in the context of this ancient story?
From a purely structural engineering standpoint today, you are absolutely right. Standardization is safe and efficient. But remember, our lens, we are reading this as a sociological critique written by an ancient people.
Right. Religion as applied physics.
Exactly. In the context of the ancient Near East, the invention of the brick is the birth of the assembly line. It is the dawn of alienated labor.
Alienated labor. For the listener who hasn't read economic theory lately, what does that actually look like on the ground?
It means the worker is entirely disconnected from the value and the creativity of the work. When you build with natural stone, you need an artist.
You need a craftsman.
Right. When you build with mass-produced bricks, you don't need master craftsmen who understand the unique nature of the material.
What do you need?
You just need unskilled, subjugated human bodies to repeat the exact same physical motion endlessly until they drop.
Scoop the mud, fill the mold, burn the brick.
Lay the brick, scoop the mud, fill the mold, over and over and over.
Just completely mindless.
To build a massive city and a tower with its top in the skies using bricks requires a staggering amount of human labor. It requires a massive captive workforce that has been forced to meet relentless daily quotas.
It turns the human being into a brick.
Exactly.
If you are just doing the exact same repetitive motion, you are as interchangeable as the mud you are shaping.
That is exactly the sociological critique the text is making. It is the material realization of the one language. The system views the humans as totally interchangeable units of labor.
Because they're all doing the exact same thing.
Right. If a brick cracks in the kiln, you don't carefully try to patch it or fix it. You just throw it out into the rubble pile and grab another identical brick.
Man, that is bleak.
It is. If a worker collapses from heat exhaustion while building the tower, the system doesn't pause to mourn or care for them. You just replace them with another identical worker.
And as you're describing this, a huge light bulb is going off for me regarding the rest of the Bible.
Oh.
Because we see this exact mechanism echo later in the text. This isn't just a one-off story in Genesis. This is the exact same extractive, oppressive technology that Pharaoh uses to enslave the Israelites in the book of Exodus.
Yes, the brick quotas.
Right. The massive social crisis of Exodus begins when Pharaoh says to the enslaved Israelites, make the exact same quota of bricks, but we are no longer providing you with the straw. Go gather your own straw, but don't let your daily brick count drop by a single unit.
It's the ultimate alienated labor.
Exactly. The brick is the physical, recurring symbol throughout the ancient text of a system that views human life purely as an exploitable resource.
That is a brilliant connection, and it proves that the authors of these texts were deeply concerned with the sociology of empire.
They weren't just writing about buildings.
No, they were writing about systems of control. And if we connect this to the broader motivations in the Babel story, we have to look at the stated reason the elites are building this tower in the first place.
All right, let's look at the text again. Genesis says, they said to one another, let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth.
Lest we be dispersed.
Lest we be scattered. That is such a revealing phrase.
It really is. It is the core material friction of the entire narrative. Through this lens, we have to ask, what is the natural, healthy motion of human survival, especially in a primitive world?
Well, it's to spread out, right? To migrate.
Yes.
Like if a valley runs out of game to hunt or the soil gets depleted from farming, human beings naturally pack up, disperse, adapt to new environments, diversify their skills, and find new resources.
It's literally how we populated the globe.
Exactly.
The natural, healthy dispersal of humanity into diverse groups and cultures is how we survive as a species. It builds resilience.
Right, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. If one settlement fails because of a drought, another settlement 100 miles away survives because they adapted to a river delta.
Okay, I see where you're going.
But the elites organizing the Babel Project are absolutely terrified of this natural human dispersal. Think about why.
Because if the people scatter, the elites lose their concentrated workforce.
Exactly.
You can't be a powerful king if all your subjects just decide to walk away and start their own little autonomous farms over the next mountain range.
Precisely. The elites lose their power. They want to freeze the natural progression of society. They want to stop the natural motion of human history.
So they build a cage.
Yes. They decide to build a monolithic tower.
And crucially, they aren't building this tower to literally reach a metaphysical God in the clouds.
No.
I think that's the Sunday school version. We all get taught that they were just arrogant and wanted to physically climb up to heaven.
Right, as if they thought God was just sitting on a cloud a few thousand feet up.
Exactly. But in this materialist framework, the tower serves a very practical, earthly purpose. It is a physical, inescapable center of gravity.
A center of gravity, I like that.
Yeah, they are hoarding human labor. They are creating the first bosses God structure. By concentrating all the moral, physical, and economic capital at the absolute top of a massive, highly visible hierarchy, they are creating a system specifically designed to prevent the working class from dispersing.
Yes.
The tower is a tether. You look up and you remember who owns you.
It is a tether, and it is a machine for extracting value from those interchangeable human bricks. But here is the fundamental law of material physics that the ancient authors are documenting in this text.
What's the law?
A system built on total extraction, interchangeable humans, and the violent suppression of natural human motion is structurally unstable.
That has to break.
It is a mathematical impossibility for it to last forever. It will inevitably reach a breaking point.
Which brings us to the actual rupture in the story, the climax of the Babel narrative. Let's look at Genesis 11, verses 5 through 9. The text says, quote, "And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do."
The one language again.
Exactly. It goes on, quote, "And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city." End quote.
Let's strip away the mythology and examine the mechanics of this divine intervention.
Yes, please.
Because remember, our operating rule for this hour, the materialist Christian lens, absolutely forbids us from reading this as a petty, insecure deity who is feeling jealous because human beings figured out how to build a really tall brick building.
Right. God isn't sitting on a cloud looking down at his ziggurat and thinking, oh no, they're getting too close to my living room. I better scramble their brains.
No, of course not. That reduces the text to a cartoon.
It totally reduces it to a cartoon and ignores the profound sociological insight of the authors.
Exactly. Instead, through this framework, the word God in the specific text acts as the naming of a reliable, large-scale moral predictability.
A moral predictability.
Yes, the authors are using the language of the divine to describe a structural inevitability. They are documenting a law of human nature just as real as gravity,
And what is that law here?
that a system of total extraction and absolute forced uniformity always collapses under its own massive weight.
Okay, let's unpack this structural inevitability for a second. If you're listening to this and you've ever worked for a massive monopolistic mega corporation, you have probably lived through this exact collapse.
Oh, without a doubt.
Imagine a company that buys up every single competitor. They centralize all their logistics. They force everyone onto the same proprietary software.
The one language of the corporation.
Exactly. The company grows so massive and so incredibly top-heavy that its own sheer size becomes a fatal vulnerability. Eventually, what happens?
It starts to
Yeah, the internal bureaucracy starts to fracture. Middle management literally cannot communicate with the realities of the warehouse floor.
Right. The executives sitting in the C-suite are totally alienated from the daily friction experienced by the workers.
And the corporate jargon, their one language, starts to mean absolutely nothing.
It becomes empty.
Totally empty. Communication inherently breaks down, and the monopoly eventually shatters into dozens of competing agile startups because the centralized structure simply cannot sustain the sheer amount of energy required to hold it all together forcefully.
That is a perfect, modern material translation of the Babel event. The confusion of language in the text is not a magical curse zapped into their brains from the sky.
Right?
It is the natural, inevitable fragmentation of an over-centralized, alienated workforce. When a system treats people as interchangeable bricks and suppresses their natural motion for too long, incredible friction builds up inside the system.
People get tired. People get resentful. Factions form.
Exactly. The shared narrative, the one language that justified the empire, shatters because it no longer reflects the lived reality of the people being crushed by it.
Because their realities are completely different.
Exactly. The worker hauling mud realizes they have absolutely nothing in common with the elite managing the project from the shade. Their languages diverge naturally based on their material reality.
So when the text says God scattered them, it's not framing the scattering as a divine punishment.
No, not at all.
Because I feel like I was always taught that Babel was a story of human hubris followed by God's punishment.
Yeah.
Like, bad humans, smite, now you're scattered.
That is the crucial pivot this framework demands. No, it is not a punishment. It is the necessary survival mechanism of human society.
Survival mechanism.
Yes. God scattering the people is the ancient text's way of describing the system rupturing to save humanity from itself.
Wow. Saving humanity from itself.
When a power structure hoards all labor and attempts to freeze the natural, diverse progression of humanity, the system must rupture to restart moral and social evolution.
Because if it didn't.
If it didn't rupture, humanity would just be an endless, static slave camp. The Babel Project fails because it violated the fundamental laws of human social physics.
Right.
The tower is abandoned. The people finally do what they were meant to do all along. They disperse.
But the tension of the story remains. Like, the people scatter, sure. But the fundamental problem of how to build a society, how to coordinate human effort without resorting to totalitarian extraction, remains totally unresolved in the plains of Shinar.
It's an open question.
Yeah. The tower is left empty, crumbling into the dust, but the blueprint for that tower is still hardwired into the human mind. We still have this instinct to centralize, to control, to build empires.
Exactly. And to prove the incredible precision of this materialist framework, we cannot just look at Genesis 11 in isolation and call it a day.
Right, we have to follow the thread.
We have to trace the exact wire of this specific tension, this centralized brick-building hierarchy, forward through the entire biblical canon.
We have to follow the algorithm.
We have to follow this exact sociological problem all the way to the New Testament, directly to the moment it is finally confronted, absorbed, and resolved.
So what does this all mean when we fast forward thousands of years? We carry the weight of this unresolved tension, the friction of top-down extracted labor versus the absolute human need for decentralized autonomy and dignity.
Yes.
And we bring that heavy, unresolved tension right to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21.
This is where it all comes together.
It really does. Jesus enters Jerusalem, and he directly confronts the religious elite of his day. And what have these elites done? Through this lens, they haven't just built a religion.
No, they have built a new Babel.
They absolutely have. In Matthew 21, Jesus tells the religious leaders the parable of the tenants.
Right.
If we read it materially, it is a brilliant, devastating sociological critique of their power structure.
Walk us through it.
So in the parable, a landowner plants a vineyard, puts a wall around it, and leases it out to tenants, the laborers. But when harvest time comes, the landlords, the elites who control the system, demand the fruit.
They want the extraction.
Yes. They send messengers to extract the value of the laborer's physical work. And when the laborers resist this extraction, the elites use violence. They beat and kill the messengers.
Maintaining the monopoly through force.
Exactly. Finally, they kill the landowner's son, thinking they can permanently hoard the inheritance, hoard the means of production, and maintain absolute control over the moral capital of the society.
Jesus is actively trapping the religious leaders in their own extractive logic. He is exposing the fact that the religious hierarchy of his day is functioning exactly like the ancient builders of Babel in Genesis. They have placed themselves at the absolute top of a monolithic structure. They are hoarding the fruit of the common people's labor, and they are using systemic violence to maintain their hierarchy.
And then Jesus acts as the final rupture.
He becomes the scattering force.
He looks at them and declares that the kingdom will be taken away from the hoarders, from the empire builders, and given to a scattered people who actually produce fruit on the ground level.
And we have to look incredibly closely at the physical materials Jesus references to make this point. This is where the whole framework just clicks together perfectly.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Because he doesn't just tell a nice story about a vineyard. He quotes a specific piece of ancient poetry right to their faces. He quotes Psalm 118. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone.
The stone. Oh, that is massive. He specifically says the stone, not the brick.
Exactly. This is where the materialist reading bridges the entire biblical arc, from Genesis to the Gospels. Think back to our breakdown of ancient masonry.
Right, the craftsman versus the assembly line.
Yes. The builders of Babel and the religious elites of Jesus' day both desperately desired uniform, interchangeable bricks to build their empires.
And they wanted compliance.
They wanted people who fit perfectly into the pre-made mold of the hierarchy without causing any friction. But Christ presents himself and the grassroots movement he is building among the poor as the irregular stone.
Wow.
He represents the peasant, the cast-off, the marginalized laborer.
And as we established earlier, a natural stone cannot be mass-produced. It inherently has friction.
It has unique, jagged dimensions.
Yes, it absolutely does not fit into an extractive, uniform assembly line hierarchy. You can't just shove a natural stone into a brick wall without ruining the uniformity of the wall.
Precisely. And what do the builders of empire do when they encounter a stone they cannot mold or control?
They reject it. They cast it aside into the rubble.
But Christ is looking at the elites and saying that the very thing the extractive system rejects, the unmoldable, autonomous, deeply unique human being, is actually the foundational cornerstone of a true, just society.
That is incredible.
When the builders reject the stone, their monolithic structure shatters. The logic of Babel is finally broken by the irregular stone.
Okay, this is a massive paradigm shift, but it leaves us with a massive practical question.
Which is?
If the monolithic tower is broken, if the brick assembly line is rejected, what actually replaces it? Because humanity still has to coordinate.
Right, we can't just be isolated individuals.
Exactly. We still have to build a society. We can't just have 8 billion irregular stones rolling around with no connection to each other. How does Christ resolve the Babel mechanism materially?
For that resolution, we look at Matthew chapter 13, verse 33. Here we see the exact material replacement for the Tower of Babel.
Okay, lay it on us.
Christ gives a very short, one-sentence parable about how this new society coordinates. He says, "The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour till it was all leavened."
Leaven, yeast.
Yes.
This is a total inversion of the Babel blueprint. Christ explicitly and permanently abandons the model of a towering static monument built by alienated forced labor.
Right. He doesn't say the kingdom of heaven is like a much better, slightly taller tower built by nicer, more ethical managers.
No, he changes the physics of the system entirely. Let's compare the mechanics here.
Okay, let's do it.
A tower is built from the top down through the extraction of labor and the hoarding of capital. It relies on forced concentration and extreme visibility.
It's a monument to the elites.
Exactly. But leaven yeast operates through decentralized, hidden organic labor. Notice who is doing the work in the parable. It is worked into the dough by a woman.
Which is a huge detail.
It is. In the ancient world, baking bread was historically the most marginalized, invisible, uncompensated form of domestic labor.
Yeah.
Jesus centers the entire new societal structure on the invisible worker.
And think about how yeast actually works scientifically compared to a brick kiln. Leaven doesn't extract from the flour.
Right.
It permeates the flour. It spreads biologically, organically from the bottom up. It doesn't force the flour to burn away its moisture and become an identical rigid brick.
It doesn't destroy the material to use it.
Exactly. Yeast interacts with the flour, respects its chemical makeup, and causes the whole mass to rise together through mutual solidarity. It's a living network.
What's truly fascinating here is how completely the dialectic has moved.
It really has.
We started our journey today with the monolithic Tower of Babel. It was highly visible, highly centralized, deeply coercive, and as we saw, ultimately very fragile.
Destined to collapse.
Yes. And then we arrive thousands of years later at the leavened dough. It is invisible, it is decentralized, it is entirely cooperative, and it is highly resilient.
The confusion of language at Babel scattered humanity to save them from a deadly monopoly.
Right.
Christ introduces a system that doesn't need one language or forced uniformity to coordinate. It coordinates through shared action, through shared material survival, and organic permeation.
The kingdom being described here is a flat, interconnected network, not a vertical, extractive hierarchy.
That is just incredible. If you've been tracking with us, we have just traced a single, highly specific sociological wire.
The ancient technology of centralized control and the fundamental human resistance to it.
Exactly. We traced it from the deep, mythic past of Genesis directly to the material, grounded teachings of the New Testament.
And that, ultimately, is the power of utilizing this materialist Christian lens. It demands that we stop looking for easy magic tricks.
Or reading these texts as simple children's stories.
Exactly. It forces us to look at the structural motion of humanity. It's the story of human beings desperately trying to figure out how to survive together, how to build communities, without systematically destroying each other in the process.
That's exactly it.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. Let's just take a second to look back at the ground we've covered.
We covered a lot.
We really did.
Yeah.
We didn't read the Bible today as a book of mystical spells or distant theology. We read it as a deeply human survival manual, a sociological fossil record.
Yes.
We watched ancient communities test survival structures over millennia, recording the catastrophic failure of totalitarian monopolies, the fragility of the brick, and contrasting it with the enduring power of decentralized organic solidarity, the resilience of the leaven.
We saw the brick fail under its own weight, and we saw the leaven rise from the bottom up.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering concept to chew on as you go about the rest of your day.
Something to really think about.
Yeah. I want you to look around at our modern world. Look past the ancient dirt and stone, and look at the massive tech monopolies that define our current era.
The new towers.
Exactly. Look at the algorithmically controlled social feeds you scroll through. Look at the relentless, invisible extraction of your personal data every time you click a screen.
It's all around us.
Consider how these massive, untouchable systems are the exact new iteration of Babel. They are deeply alienated systems of power. They are hoarding our language, they are standardizing our behavior, and they are trying to force us all to speak one language of consumerism and outrage.
All to prevent us from scattering into diverse, autonomous, healthy communities.
Right. They want us to be predictable, uniform, easily measurable data bricks in their digital towers.
They are terrified of our natural human entropy, our unpredictability, just as the ancient kings were.
So ask yourself this. In a world that is still completely obsessed with building massive centralized towers and manufacturing billions of identical human bricks, what is your leaven?
That's the question.
Where is your friction? How do you permeate the system you live in from the ground up? How do you practice the kind of hidden, organic, interpersonal solidarity that a corporate algorithm absolutely cannot extract value from?
That is the material work of our time. It is the challenge left unresolved at Shinar and handed directly to us.
Thank you so much for joining us on this intense intellectual exploration today. We know this was heavy, but we hope this system override has challenged you to keep looking past the surface.
We hope it empowers you to see the real structural motion of the world around you.
Absolutely. Next time you find yourself standing in the middle of a massive, perfectly efficient warehouse, or quietly scrolling through a perfectly curated, frictionless feed, Remember the planes of Shinar. The hum of perfect efficiency is often just the sound of a tower waiting to fall. Until next time, keep jiving deep.